Hello, third grade students. This week we are going to be learning about fables. And fables are really short stories where the author tries to teach you a lesson about what is right and what is wrong. And that lesson is usually called a moral. So we are going to read some of Aesop's fables today. And Aesop was a storyteller who was also a slave during ancient Greek times. Okay? So we're going to read a couple of his fables today. And then at the end of the reading, I want you to pick one and tell me what was the moral of the story and how you can use that to guide how you behave in current society. Okay? So I'm going to read you some fables now that we can use. Okay, the first one is called The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. A wolf resolved to disguise himself in order that he might prey upon a flock of sheep without fear of detection. So he clothed himself in a sheepskin and slipped among the sheep when they were out at pasture. He completely deceived the shepherd, and when the flock was penned in for the night, he was shut in with them. But that very night, as it happened, the shepherd, requiring a supply of mutton for the table, laid his hands on the wolf, mistaking him for a sheep, and finished him off with a knife on the spot. So here's the picture to go with that fable. So, what do you think the moral of that story is? And how do you think that could be used in modern society? Okay. The next one is the monkey as king. At a gathering of all the animals, and delighted them so much that they made him their king. The fox, however, was very much disgusted at the proclamation of the monkey, so having one day found a trap with a piece of meat in it, he took the monkey there and said to him, "Here is a dainty morsel I have found, sire. I did not take it myself because I thought it ought to be reserved for you, our king. Will you be pleased to accept it?" The monkey went at once for the meat and got caught in the trap. Then he bitterly reproached the fox for leading him into the danger. But the fox only said, "Oh, monkey, you call yourself king of the beast and haven't more sense than to be taken in like that." Okay? What was the moral of that story? What do you think the moral was? I don't want to tell you what the moral is for every story because you have to think about what the moral is when you're reading fables. That's part of what we do when we're learning about them. Okay? The Eagle and the Crow. One day, an eagle saw the eagle and the crow. One day, a crow saw an eagle swoop down on a lamb and carry it away in its talons. "My word," said the crow, "I'll do that myself." So it flew high up in the air and then came shooting down with a great whirling of wings onto the back of a big ram with the intention of carrying it off. It had no sooner alighted than its claws got caught fast in the wool, and nothing it could do was of any use. There it was stuck, flapping away, and only making things worse instead of better. By and by up came the shepherd. "Aho," he said. "So that's what you'd be doing, is it?" And he took the crow and clipped its wings and carried it home to his children. It looked so odd that they didn't know what to make of it. What sort of bird is it, father? They asked. It's a crow, he replied, and nothing but a crow. But it wants to be taken for an eagle. So, what is the moral for that story? What's the lesson? The two goats. Two proud goats happened to meet on the opposite cliffs of a high mountain range where a fierce river ran below through a rocky valley. Only bridge across the chasm, the only a bridge across the chasm, which means like a big hole, was a fallen tree so narrow as to frighten two mice passing each other at the same time. Both stubborn goats felt that they had the right to cross the river first, so setting one hoof on at a time upon the slender log, they found themselves head to head in the middle of the bridge. Neither goat would give way to the other, and finally they both fell headlong into the roaring waters below. What's the moral of that story? The heron. The heron went waddling one early morning to take his breakfast from the shallows of a stream. There were many fish in the water, but the stately heron thought he could find better. Such small fry is certainly not suitable fare for a heron, he remarked to himself, and as a choice young perch swam by. But the heron tipped his long bill in the air and snapped, "No, sir, I certainly wouldn't open my beak for that." The sun grew hotter, and all the fish left the shallows for the cool, deep middle of the stream. When the heron could find no trace of a fish left in the stream, he was very grateful to finally break his fast on a mere snail. So instead of eating a fish, he had to eat a snail. So what's the moral of that story? Oh, this is a good one. This is one of Miss Rouse's favorites. The grasshopper and the ants. One fine day, and when some ants were busy drying their store of corn, which had got rather damp during a long spell of rain, presently up came a grasshopper and begged them to spare her a few grains, for she said, "I'm simply starving." The ants stopped work for a moment, thought this was against their principles. "May we ask," they said, "what were you doing with yourself all last summer? Why didn't you collect a store of food for the winter?" "The fact is," replied the grasshopper, "I was so busy singing that I didn't have the time." If I had spent the su- If you spent the summer singing," replied the ants, "you can't do better than sin. You can't do better than spend the winter dancing." And they chuckled and went on with their work. So there's that picture. And this one, you've seen in many, many cartoons, but I'm going to read it anyway, and this will be the last one. Um, this one has an easy moral, and you'll know it right away. So here it is: the hare and the tortoise. One day, a hare was making fun of a tortoise for being so slow upon his feet. "Wait a bit," said the tortoise. "I'll run a race with you, and I'll wager that I win." "Oh, well," replied the hare, who was much amused by the idea. "Let's try and see." And it was soon agreed that the fox should set a course for them and be the judge. When the time came, both started off together, but the hare was soon so far ahead that he thought he might as well have a rest. So down he lay and fell fast asleep. Meanwhile, the tortoise kept plodding on, and in time reached the goal. At last, the hare woke up with a start and dashed on at his fastest pace, but only to find that the tortoise had already won the race. So, what is the moral of that story? Okay, the next video will show you how to post your reply to the Padlet.